Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. See a lot of names in the attendee list that have been here before, so thank you very much for joining again. If you've been at our webinars before and if you're new, we both hope, me and Mike who are on the call, that you get good value out of it. And please provide us with some feedback afterwards, either with a direct email, that's fine, or there's going to be a survey that's going to pop up, so please fill that out. Today's topic is about building and managing taxonomies in SharePoint 2010. As you hopefully know, that in SharePoint 2010, one of the biggest pieces that Microsoft has put out there is the taxonomy manager, or the term store, right? And being able to create and manage your taxonomy directly within the product, and being able to use that to tag and have a great ability to have a search, have search and navigation privileges with that tagging is a great functionality, very powerful. And Mike Doan, who's here with us, a taxonomy expert and also expert in SharePoint, is going to be talking exactly about that opportunity and exactly how that works out within SharePoint. So Mike Doan is from Term Store Management LLC, and actually I'm going to, after I do a few more things, a few more presentations about SharePointVideos.com, I'll have him describe exactly what he does and who he is. We at SharePointVideos.com, who is the sponsor of this webinar, have committed to providing education in all different areas of SharePoint, including Term Store. So we actually have a DVD that we are announcing that we're releasing today. Let me actually show you that here. Here's our site, SharePointVideos.com. So if you go to SharePointVideos.com, you go to Products, either here, or you click on Browse our DVD collection. Either way, you'll see all the DVDs that we have, that we offer. And the new one right now is, here we go, SharePoint 2010 Term Store. Mike Doan is the author of this DVD, targeted towards taxonomists, IT professionals, site collection admins, and content managers. And you have a couple of different, there's a couple of different videos that you can also actually watch for free that are in the DVD collection, so you can play that if you like. You can probably hear Mike right now. So anyway, take advantage of that if you like. Because we just released this, we have a couple of coupon codes also that you can take advantage of. You can get 10% off the Term Store DVD, the one that I just showed you right now, until the 23rd of this month, using this coupon code SPWebinar. Also, if you are a member of our site, if you're a subscriber, of our site, then you can get 25% off any single user license DVD in our collection. Okay, so that's I think a pretty good big saving here. And the coupon code for that is right there, as you can see. Let me highlight these things so you know which one is which. Okay, so you got the member DVD. That's the coupon code you want to use. If you're a member of the site, you can use SPWebinar, the coupon code that you can use for 10% off the Term Store DVD until 12/23, and those cannot be combined, as of course expected. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and Mike will talk. Mike, if you can introduce yourself briefly, and then jump right in as to what you're going to talk about. And before I actually do that, I'm going to go ahead and change and give you presentation rights too, by the way. Here we go. All right, here we go, Mike.
There we go. Good. Hi, everybody. This is Mike Doan. I'm owner of Term Management LLC. We're a company that specializes in creating and managing taxonomies, especially on the SharePoint 2010 platform. And what we have been doing for years and years is helping companies build out taxonomies within their systems that can better enable findability. One of the biggest complaints we hear is that companies have employees who create a lot of information and yet can't find it. So siloed information, creating and managing content in silos, especially in a SharePoint environment, is a problem that's plagued companies for years. SharePoint 2007 kind of had a way to go about managing, adding some metadata, which are the labels, the tags that you could put onto documents and lists and things in SharePoint, but 2007 was nothing compared to 2010. And what I'm going to demo today, and I'll take my time because I realize that sometimes I move a little fast, and in this, and screen sometimes doesn't catch up with the speed at which I'm talking, so I'll try to keep pace with my screen. What I'm going to talk about today is how you can build and maintain taxonomies inside of SharePoint 2010 in the term store, which is called the Term Store Management Tool, which you should see on your screen right now, and how you go about using the terms of taxonomies that you create to do things like set up custom site columns that you can apply to content types, or you can apply to lists and things like that. But really, the whole point of using a taxonomy, and a lot of companies are coming around to understanding the value of using taxonomy. The real value is that finally we can really easily manage labels, the tags that people create, and have some preferred, what are called preferred terms, or a controlled vocabulary, which you can kind of see here. I'm demonstrating with this opened term set I've got open called General Business Taxonomy. You're able to better control how users can apply these labels, and then that enables other users to be able to find the content that they're looking for, even if the content itself doesn't contain the keywords or phrases or labels that we're applying. This is especially good when you've got a search system that does a great job of finding indexed keywords, indexed words inside of documents, but a lot of times there's cases where you want to apply extra labels, extra tags to documents, to lists that aren't necessarily in those documents, but still are valuable because that's how people want to find things. And that's where taxonomies come into play. That in that sense that you're able to apply a tag like accounting and finance or data warehousing to a document or to a list that might not be in that document or list, but still that's how people would do a search for it. And when search scopes, and I know that I'm sure there's DVDs that talk about the best cases for setting up search inside of SharePoint, as long as a search scope is enabled to take advantage of the terms and the metadata, is also what it's called, for these taxonomies, it greatly enhances your users being able to find the information. So let's start at really what is a taxonomy. I mean, I think most of us sort of understand. I made a very simple example here of what a taxonomy is. It's a hierarchical list of terms, organized into a hierarchy, which is pretty simple. Inside of the Term Store Management Tool, which you can access from your team site through site settings, and you end up with the Term Store Management Tool. All of this, by the way, first needs to be enabled by your system administrator, so I don't want to assume that all of this has been set up in advance. You need to work with your system admin to go ahead and enable, to basically switch on, turn on the capability to use the term store, and you do that through the central admin. That's something that you arrange. We're not going to talk about that here, but that's something that you do want to arrange with your central administrator, is to make sure the term store management tool is enabled and active on your sites. And realistically, you can use the term store management tool to create taxonomies across your entire SharePoint farm, or you can create taxonomies within a site collection. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You can borrow terms back and forth. The point is that really, I always recommend that you start at the highest level, build out a few taxonomies that you can use maybe across your entire farm, or at least across an entire group of site collections, if you will. You want to make sure that you're not building these taxonomies in isolation, but we'll get to more onto that later. But first, I kind of want to just explain what a taxonomy is for those who maybe are kind of unsure, and then how the taxonomies inside of 2010 actually work. So there's three basic components to the term store. There's what are called term groups, and you can see here animals is a term group, and I can create a new term set underneath animals, or I can import a term set. I'm going to talk about that later, but really what this is that groups are large principles of organizing things. So in this case, I've got animals. You can see here I've got some other taxonomies that I've built on clinical healthcare. Here's one from the Dublin Core, one addressing some from FEMA. I have a general business taxonomy. I've got one in Spanish. I've got healthcare insurance, HR, and so on. I've got a lot of different taxonomies already built, but they start with you creating from this root, which is your root taxonomy, which goes across the entire farm, this term group called animals. Once you've created that sort of high-level organization principle called animals, you can go ahead and start to create term sets. And you can see here that this little icon looks like a little collection of labels, and that's a term set. And what I always recommend when you're building out a taxonomy, that you start at that major organizing principle like animals. But then for term sets, you really want to have these broken out according to major subject areas. And I'll give you an example here at the bottom of the screen. Actually, let me break this out right here. I'll scroll down. And this is a taxonomy that I imported. You can get it for free from WAND, W-A-N-D taxonomies. They provide this sort of free downloadable general business taxonomy that you kind of use to get a start with. You can use it to start building out some initial taxonomies if you don't want to do it yourself. But you can see here that these are pretty high level. Accounting and finance is a high level. This is the way you build out a term set. So in this case, I built out a term set called business taxonomy. I've got labels underneath here. If I was only building out a taxonomy for my company, as opposed to this was just a general business, I'd probably have accounting and finance, HR, IT, legal, as what these called term sets, as you kind of see here. Typically, and in the video I explain this, you want to set up your term sets according to the major organizing terms in your company. I'm sorry, in how you want to share your information. I typically don't recommend, and I'm talking about this in the video too, I don't recommend you organize your taxonomy term sets here by your org chart. Org charts in a company tend to change a lot. Really what you're trying to get at here with these organizing principles of terms is topics. And topics within your company are going to vary widely depending on your vertical, depending on how you do business, what field you do business in. But the idea is that you want to organize your topics for your company rather than going down a strict hierarchical path if you're following your org chart. We talk about that more in the video, but that's kind of the basis for how I want to organize my term sets. And once I get into a term set, you can see here I can start to You can start to include, and this is going to be typical for. I know you've probably run across this before if you've worked in the term store. I want to do a refresh here, and that's okay. On the videos, by the way, too, I also talk about the refresh on term store that I use online SharePoint, and I've used client-side SharePoint as well. In both cases, there are times when the term store gets to be a little fussy, and I always recommend doing a refresh. And so that's the case here. You can see here I'm refreshing this, and you can tell I've been through this before a number of times, and this is not uncommon. So we're back to, sorry about that little distraction there, we're back to our term set. Term set, term dogs. Now we've got this hierarchical parent-child relationship where I've got a term like bulldog underneath the term dogs. And what I typically do is go in and just build out my taxonomy based on this hierarchical relationships that I want to set up. You see it's pretty obvious here. If I wanted to do another term, I could create a term called cats, hit return. It adds the term cats. And I don't want to put that under dogs, so I might want to create another term set called cats. So that actually makes a little bit more sense. Let's go back and delete this term. Yep, nice warning there. So under animals, I'd create a new term set. Let's call it cats. I don't have to create the label cats underneath this, but I do it just to kind of help out a little bit here on visualization. And now I can go in and create cats underneath that. Notice that when I add a new term, it puts it into a hierarchy mode. So in this case, I could just type in the term tabby. Also, did you notice there as I was typing this in, I get the predictive type ahead, and I'll show you this later what this really means, but this is really, really great because as I'm adding terms, I can see if they've already been used before and where they're being used. So in this case, tabby is not here, so I'm just going to go ahead and add tabby and hit return, and you can see that's how I'd go ahead and start to build out a taxonomy with inside of SharePoint. So again, I start with the highest level group, which is animals. I can build out term sets, dogs. I can build a term set called cats. I can build a term set called any other animal I want. But this is the basic organizing principle inside of the term store management tool of how you build out taxonomies. It's pretty straightforward. And at this point, the term bulldog, the term Dalmatian, the term poodle, whatever it happens to be, I could go ahead and use as a tag when I'm building out or adding or uploading documents to a term, to a document library, to a site. Let me show you a little example of what I mean, and really the value, now that I've shown you how those tags are built and how they're used, the value of adding tags. So here you can see a pretty standard example. This is a screenshot inside of a document library, and I've got you've seen this before, I've got documents inside of here, and I've got folders, and I got reports and logos and all kinds of stuff. So this is pretty typical for a document library inside of SharePoint. But in this case, I'm going to show you what adding a tag can do. So here you can see up on the right, I'm not going to do this live because there's too much chance for technical problems there, so I just do it through a series of screenshots. But as you can see up here, I'm going to do a search on the phrase demand forecasting. I think that there is a report in here that is about demand forecasting that I want, and yet I'm just going to go ahead and do a search for it. Note before I start the column here called user tags. So if I did a search for demand forecasting, oftentimes it comes up, search results didn't find anything. I searched for the phrase demand forecasting. It says we didn't find any results. But the interesting thing here is that I may, as a user, I may know that there is a document in there about demand forecasting. But what I'm getting back here is that the search system couldn't find anything for the phrase demand forecasting. So then I think, how can I make that better? Well, what you can do inside of your SharePoint sites now with Term Store is I can go ahead and select that document, say I know it's an internal assessment, and note again user tags. I can go to use that document, and I can go edit the properties, and I think we've all probably done this at one point or another. And now what I can do is, inside of editing the properties, is that there's the document, the internal assessment PDF, and I'm going to start to tag this document with demand forecasting because I know it is about demand forecasting. So I have the ability, and you can see over here, this small icon on the right indicates that this is attached to a taxonomy, so it enables me to go find terms, and that's, again, set up in advance. But in this case, I can go down and you can see the phrase demand forecasting. There it is. So I started to type out demand forecasting. It then allows me to go and see and choose that tag, demand forecasting. And you can see now it will be applied as a user tag to this internal assessment document. Now, this internal assessment document may not at all contain the phrase demand forecasting, but I know it's about demand forecasting. So now what it did was once I applied it, it went ahead and applied this user tag marketing. It picked up what's called the parent term, and it added the phrase demand forecasting and associated it to this document. So it's pretty simple. I mean, you can already figure out where I'm going with this, is that now once the site reindexes for search, and it's set up to pick up these user tags, to include these user tags in search, if I went back and entered the phrase demand forecasting, did a search again, it would come up. And it comes up not because the document necessarily contains the phrase demand forecasting, but because I've added the label, the tag demand forecasting onto it. Notice here, in addition, it's picked up the parent term marketing. So in other words, what I've done here is I've organized inside of my taxonomy the parent term marketing, and underneath marketing I would added the label demand forecasting in that hierarchical structure that I showed you with cats and dogs. So in this case, if it was a tabby, for example, it would also pick up cats. So if I did a search on cats or tabbies, the document would then come up in search results, and even though it's not contained in the document itself, I'd more easily be able to find it. So that really is the simplest way to try to explain the value of applying tags to content from a taxonomy, is that moving forward, that taxonomy is controlled. In other words, marketing demand forecasting as a taxonomy is controlled. Or here, I can see that I can control what types of dogs get put into here. So when a user goes to add the tag, they can see that the word, for example, Dalmatian is spelled correctly, or poodle doesn't have an S. I might be able to add more and different terrier types underneath here, so that I could say, well, if I've got a terrier, I can add the different types of terriers underneath it, so that those tags, when I go to apply the tag that you saw earlier, when I edit the properties, it'll pick up all the tags and its parent tag as well, which will greatly enhance search. So that's really one of the most fundamental ways that using a taxonomy for inside of your SharePoint site is going to better enable search. If you can extrapolate or think of that differently, you can go ahead and say that you could use these terms on lists. You can use these terms in content types. You can use these terms in a lot of different places within your SharePoint site, and that is going to, again, greatly enhance how people find and can find this information.
So hey, Mike, somebody's asking a question, and I'm going to interject and ask that question here. This person is asking a question: how are managed metadata columns an advantage when searching for items versus site columns with regular choice fields?
So the difference there is that managed metadata columns can be used across entire site collections and more than one site collection. So one of the real reasons for doing this, the companies that we work with, is that they might have a group, for example, a sales group, who has done a great job of setting up, and I worked with the company that did this, setting up the pick list values, the choice list inside of their site collection, but that was not made available to other site collections across the company. And what we found was that even though that sales group did an awesome job of building out pick lists, is what we call them in taxonomy terms, I guess, control vocabulary list, they've done a great job at doing that. That was totally isolated, and the HR groups and other groups weren't able to easily use those labels as they want to use it. Sharing and reusing terms across multiple site collections, multiple areas, is one of the key values of doing a taxonomy in the term store as opposed to doing it locally. And then in addition to that, you can borrow terms and reuse them locally and add your own flavor or color to them. And that way it's basically, we can set up a large taxonomy for an entire company, and then individual groups like a sales group or an HR group can reuse terms locally. And I'm going to give a demo of that in a little bit for reuse. But what we're trying to get at here is that in order to really share common terms across multiple site collections in a company, which is one of the driving factors and forces of building taxonomy in the first place, is that you really need to have a managed metadata column to do that, because not only does it enable that sharing, it also enables better updates. So if I make a change to a term, if I change its synonym, for example, it will be automatically applied and updated across all those sites. So if you just think of it that way, the difference is instead of one group using taxonomies in a very small environment and not sharing, using the term store allows you to share across multiple areas.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
I hope that answered the question.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Cool, thanks. So a couple things here. So once we got this fundamental idea down of term groups, term sets, terms, and then terms underneath them, so this would be the parent term, this would be the child term, and so on, we want to start talking about how to go about using these. And the planning part, I talked about this in the video, is I'm not going to go over any slides today with planning, but typically what you want to do is get a certain set of users involved in how you plan out a taxonomy. There are very few companies that I deal with have taxonomists on staff, although they do exist. Typically it's larger companies. So companies like us and others provide services to come in and help companies set these things up. And typically taxonomist isn't necessarily a full-time job, which is why for small, especially small, but even to mid-sized companies, it's not necessarily a full-time job, and they do other things. I've also talked to companies that use librarians as their taxonomists who can set this up. Information managers, master data managers can also do this kind of work. It really depends. You're looking to set it up. It's really looking for someone who understands the language of your company, how you talk about and label things, and also how you go about sharing things. So to that point earlier, sharing terms across multiple site collections is critical for getting the most out of the time you spend building your taxonomy. So that's a little example of one I just built out. But let's talk about one that take a peek deeper into a taxonomy that's already been built out fairly deeply. Again, this is the general, whoops, I don't want to go down the Spanish path unless you really want to. I'll go to the general business taxonomy, term group, term set. I'll expand this out a little bit more. And here we can see we've got these general areas, accounting and financing, And these would typically be used, and you could do this certainly, is that I would assign someone from this group to be the manager, of this area. In this case, accounting finance. I'd make it a term set because then I could control it more readily. And you can see here that if we have, we can have stakeholders, we can have contacts, primary owners, and descriptions for term sets. And I think that's the best way to go ahead and manage how these tags are used. In some cases, you don't want tags to be added to the term set. In this case, you can see here this submission policy means it's closed. It means users can't add to this term set. If you have it open, people can add to it. And also, I've seen cases where certain companies have made certain term sets not available for tagging. They do it for their own internal reasons. For the most part, you want to have that checked. But really, the point of this is that a term set can be controlled by stakeholders and owners and people who are interested in it. That goes to, a little bit later, I might talk about long-term taxonomy governance. But basically, what a term set does is it allows someone to control how that term set's being used. For terms like accounting or finance and accounting policies, terms underneath that, as we wait for this to refresh. Not uncommon, but certainly it's something that we just have to put up with. We can go ahead and just say, look, I can build out this term set. Well, how did this get here? And I think this is one of the ways that we want to talk about building out these taxonomies, and that SharePoint does provide you a way to view a sample import file. And you can see up here on the top right-hand side, I'm hovering over a link. If you clicked on that link, it would take you to this, which is the sample download you get of Excel from the term store, in which case it's set up correctly to for you to be able then to work on your terms inside of the Excel spreadsheet. And this is much easier than working on it inside of the tool itself. You can come up with a name, you can come up with a description, and so on. The key here is that you don't want to change modify any of that first row. That first row needs to stay the same, and the structure needs to stay the same. Of course, you're going to modify all of these terms over here as far as the description, level 1 term, and this is set up for you in advance. It's a nice little system. What you end up doing is you delete all these terms, of course, in here and build out your own terms, but then you import those back inside of a term group. You come over here and say import term set, and what you would do then is import that Excel spreadsheet, and that in turn would then get you what it looks like right here, accounting policies, accounts payable, etc. So it's much easier to build your taxonomies outside of the term store as close as you possibly can get them to done. When you re-import them, then you can do all your modifications inside there. I highly recommend you do that. The one catch, the one gotcha to this is that you cannot export taxonomies back out and modify them. Now, I say that with an asterisk or a caveat or whatever you want to call it, in that you can go to Codeplex and find out different ways to do this with various levels of success. But as a default, you can't export back out your taxonomies and work on them. So the key here is that, I'm switching back to the spreadsheet now, the key here is that you want to get as much work as you possibly can done in the spreadsheet, and then you want, when you import it back in, you basically are going to start doing maintenance and care of the taxonomies inside of here. What I like to do is that you can see here there's a term set called General Business Taxonomy. Again, this is the one that was pre-built by Wand Solutions. You can go to their site and find that. What I like to do is you can go ahead and build out a separate worksheet inside of your spreadsheet for term sets, and then you can import them back in, and they'll appear as the term set right here. Much easier to do than having a separate Excel file for every taxonomy. But just as a little tip there, you can go ahead and do that, and I found that really interesting because then I have a copy or a record of all of the different term sets that I've built. This is a term set right there, all the term sets that I've built, and I can go make changes or add things into the taxonomy, realizing, of course, that if I re-import it, it's going to it's not good. Let's just put it that way. It'll come in as a copy, and it'll have a little number after it, and it'll have the same name with a different number after it, and it's just not what you want to do. So my recommendation, my best practice, I guess in this case, is really do all of your work for your taxonomies outside of the term store. And then once you import them in, you really just want to focus on building and maintaining your taxonomies inside the term store. I know it's not the best. I know there's some tools out there that do it a little bit differently, but that's what I've discovered over doing hundreds of these taxonomies over the past couple of years, 2 years or so, a year and a half, is that this is the easiest way and the best way to do that.
So Mike, somebody asked a question that's related to that here. How deep can your taxonomy be? In this case, how many terms, I guess, internally, and how many subterms, so forth?
Right, right. So let's jump back over to the spreadsheet, and we can scroll to the right here, and we can see here that we've got 7 levels deep. Now, as a, I guess you could say, as a SharePoint person who uses SharePoint a lot, that looks great. I can import 7 levels deep. As a taxonomist, I'm going to have to challenge 7 levels deep. You certainly can do it. I'm not going to say anything against that. But what I typically like to do is to have shallower taxonomies, in other words, less deep. And this is entirely case dependent, so it's going to depend on how your business runs and how you want to use it. But I typically like to, instead of going deep like this, I like to build out more, like in a sense, a subsection like this right here. I could realistically go in and build this out just like this, but it's a lot easier to use the tags, and it's much more efficient, in my opinion, to apply the tags if you've built the taxonomies shallower, in a sense, rather than going deep. It just allows you a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more chance to apply tags when you go build out, content types, for example, how to do it. So I would recommend as shallow as possible. Don't go too deep, but sometimes you're just going to have to go deep, and that's just going to be, it's a case-by-case basis. So a best practice is try to keep them shallow, but I realize that doesn't work in every situation.
And you're showing also that some of the taxonomy, some of the term sets that you got over here were downloaded, were sample term sets that you got. If people want to go and search out to get these sample term sets, where would they go to get some of that stuff, the DCMI and other stuff that you have in there?
So those are taxonomies that you can go to the Dublin Core website, certainly, and do that. Most of these I've built out myself. Publicly available taxonomies can vary to degree of how much you can get. I've rarely come across a case where any taxonomy, pre-built taxonomy that I've downloaded or am using satisfies all my needs. But you can certainly search around for, like Dublin Core is pretty standard, metadata standard. You can go get those. Oftentimes, I'll find an industry standard taxonomy that I will download or export from wherever it happens to be. Make sure you check copyright. You don't want to illegally use things that don't belong to you. But if you can find one that's relevant and free, I like to typically download it, and I'm going to jump across here, put it into this template for importing it in, and build it out in there. Oftentimes, I find that the taxonomies that you can get, like from Dublin Core and elsewhere, aren't necessarily what I need exactly. So I always assume that I'm going to be able to that I'm going to have to modify taxonomies that I've downloaded. You can download an oil and gas taxonomy, for example, and it's just you need to modify it to fit your needs.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, this thing I'm showing, this general business taxonomy I'm showing here, is available for download, and you have to go kind of sign in and get it. It's not that big of a deal, and it's a nice start. But typically, and anybody out there who's built taxonomies understands this, that it's always a start, and it's never the finish line. These things are always being revised and changed over time. But these are great places to start, and that's why I'm using here, because it's a great place to start. But I think everybody who uses this understands that you have to do some modification to make it fit to your audience and how your company is using information. So that's a great place to start. So building these out. So what's the difference here? And I'm going to go into a bit of explanation. The labels here, these are terms. And so underneath the term general organizing principle here, I can have different terms underneath that. and just use these terms in any way I want to. And the key here is that you want to keep these, my practice is, there's ways to organize terms, and I don't know how far we want to go into, the whole theory of building taxonomies out, but the idea is that we want to make sure we've got these organizing principles so that they can be used, inside of content types and other places to help increase findability for content.
Yeah, and Mike in his videos also goes deep inside the understanding of the terms, and like you mentioned, right, the conceptual aspects of it. But I think right now the audience probably wants to look at the practical view of, you got these terms, exactly what all the properties are, which you're already showing, and then how do I use it? What do I do with them? How do I make my content more readily available?
Got it. So once we built this up, the next step is to go ahead and apply a site column to your content. So I've got these all built out. Here's a term set. Here's some terms. So the way I apply those is that I go into my site settings, and inside my site settings I can go ahead and create a site column, and it's a managed metadata site column. And you can see here that I've just gone in and done typical site settings. And if you're used to SharePoint, you understand this. I can go and create a type, and I create it and I assign it to a custom column, and then I go down. These are all choices that you can make, and depending on how you want to use it and things like that. But here is where we actually, I guess they used to say, rubber meets the road. Use a managed term set. So I've gone ahead here and selected use a managed term set. And what I do at this point is that I'm creating a site column that I want to use on my site, and I assign it to a part of the taxonomy that I've already built out. So I'm going to jump back and forth here just a little bit, so please excuse me for a second. So and again, we come back up into here. You can see that I built out the dogs term set, and I've got terms underneath that. And I can go over here now, and I can assign that dogs term set with the labels underneath it, dogs. We'll see that when it refreshes. Okay, that's going to be normal. Run into that every once in a while, but this is where I pick the terms I want to use in this term set, in the site column that I'm creating, that I will then apply to different content inside of the site. So I would go ahead and say yes, and at that point, I really am back to applying how I want to use these, how I want to use the terms that I'm building inside of the term store. I guess you could say where the terms meet the content is that I can assign them through site columns, and I have them basically a managed metadata site column. And I could once again go down here. I assign the columns, I assign the terms that I've built in the term store to my. I'll go ahead and hit OK. Come back to that in a second. But that's where I really go ahead and use what I've built out here in my SharePoint site. I go ahead and I say that's where I want to apply inside of a site column, inside of a content type. That's where I want to apply all these terms. And what that really means is that I'm able to now find that content that I've tagged with that site column inside of search. So earlier I showed you a case where we had the term demand forecasting, which was not at all inside of the document, but when I assigned it, I go ahead and pick up the terms from there, applied it into the document. I can go ahead and find that because it's been tagged up with that. I don't know how far I really want to go into site columns used today. I think I really want to just focus more on how it gets to there. But the number one way that all these terms and these labels that we're creating inside of all these vocabularies inside the term store, that's really where I guess you could say the rubber hits the road, is that I apply them through site columns and as custom site columns. Let me go back for a second here. I'll jump back and show you where those might be. And we're hoping that, yeah, there we go. So again, we come down here to site columns. I can assign them, but what I typically do is you go down into your custom columns, and you can see here that inside custom columns, I have that dog type managed metadata column that I set up, and that of course would be used to apply to content types, to apply to different types of content, libraries, things like that. But that's where I built that, that's where it stays. If I want to modify it as a custom column, I go back in And you saw what I did was I just associated it with a certain term set inside of here. Now you can see here I've got assigned to this term set. I have it assigned, this term group, sorry, to this term set dogs. I could go in and modify this and deselect some of these and only use certain terms, but that's realistically how, and I guess you could say the end game or the real reason that you do all the work inside of the term store is that everything you build inside of the term store here can go ahead and be used in a managed metadata site column, and you can pick the values that are going to be applied to different content types, different things. So that's, I guess, the full circle, if you will, of how it goes and applies this. And of course, the final result would be that if you apply a managed metadata label, like for example bulldog, or a variant different spellings of bulldog, to a piece of content, the content would show up in search, even if the term itself wasn't in the document. So earlier when I demonstrated the whole thing about, and you saw my earlier when I was talking about using let's go back just for a second. I can go back there. Using demand forecasting. Demand forecasting was only a taxonomic term. It wasn't contained inside of this document as an example. But the fact is that now, since it's contained in the taxonomy and I've applied it to the document itself, when I do a search for it, it's going to come up. And I guess that's really the biggest difference, and I'm going to jump back now. The biggest difference between being able to use and apply tags like this inside of your SharePoint sites is that now you have the ability, by creating these custom site columns, to apply it to documents or lists or whatever you want to do with the custom site column and be able to find the information faster. So really the process is build it inside of the term store, apply it inside of your site settings for site columns, and then once you've applied that to site column and applied it to your content types, you can have that tag. In this case, let's say for example the tag bulldog or the tag dogs would be available for tagging when you're uploading the content. And of course, we're not going to go into this demonstration, but the idea is that as you're uploading content into document libraries, you're going to be able to apply the tag to it. Of course, you can do it as you're building out also you can do it as you're building out the content type. So there's a lot of different ways to use the terms, but the point is that inside the taxonomy term store, we've already built all that out so that users, for example, don't have to type in, when they're typing in tags, they don't have to type in the exact tag, or if they do, when they're applying it into a piece of content that they're uploading, you saw earlier that the drop-down list would appear. I'll back up here just for a second. The drop-down list would appear as I guess it's not here. Oh, there it is. It would appear as I'm tagging this document, and really underneath where it says suggestions in the yellow highlighted area, this really is just a series of term sets and term groups and terms that we've built out. That the type ahead predictive typing in here is just showing you what's called a controlled vocabulary, a controlled list of terms that you would use to apply to that document. And again, I showed you that earlier, but that's kind of where everything comes together, how it all comes from creating the taxonomies in the term store to building them out inside of site columns and inside of content types, and applying them to documents, and then finding those documents in more and better ways. Now, there's a lot of different ways, and this is where we kind of get into questions I know you're probably going to end up asking me about how do all these terms get applied to documents? Right. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can apply them manually, and however you apply metadata. There's other systems and software systems that will do it automatically. And that's another description, another time for another day. But basically what you end up doing is using these terms as you set up your site columns. And in this case, you saw earlier in that series of slides I had, the site column was assigned. I'll jump back there real quick. Sorry for jumping around here. I assigned it under user tags. I associated user tags as a column with the, you saw, with the terms that I built out. And in this case, it would be marketing demand forecasting. Other case, it would be like the dogs and the Dalmatians and the samples I showed you just a second ago. So you end up assigning different site columns that manage metadata site columns to your document libraries and to your content types. And it basically just controls the list of terms right here that you're able to choose from. And Asif, anything?
Yeah, there was one thing about, so now we have, of course, the concept of content type hub now, right, in SharePoint 2010.
Correct. Yep.
Can we use term sets with that as well, the terms and term sets?
Yes, you can. Yep, yes, you can. And that's, I don't know if we have enough time right now to go into that, but I guess I could just say yes, and that's just another topic to explore on a later day. But yes, the idea is that really your taxonomy term store is your central hub for how you want to use and apply labels, tags, to all of your different content types, different lists, different ways that you use labels right now inside of SharePoint. What the taxonomy term store does is really control how all that's done, and it really presents a more unified face so that users aren't randomly assigning tags. Now you can still go ahead and up on the up here on the top right where I'm highlighting, you can still apply your tags and notes to content as you're doing it, but what you can also do is you have a greater ability to control how users are applying these tags. So the consistency of building terms out in the term store here that we've done is really going to be echoed out to how you're using those tags and labels across your entire site, your entire farm for that matter. So the recommendation is I always like to, when I work with customers, I always like to start at a high level, and then inevitably what happens is, the sales group wants their own taxonomy, and the HR group wants their own taxonomy, and everyone wants their own taxonomies, which is fantastic, but I always like to have a core set, sort of an upper layer of taxonomic terms that I use across more than just one area of a site. So, and this goes into a lot of other questions, and I'm sure people are thinking, well, who's going to do all this work, and,
Right.
and how do you manage all this? And it just brings up a lot of other questions we don't have time necessarily to address today, but the point is that inside of SharePoint 2010, this is really how you go about starting to build a way to label and tag your content.
And as I understand it also that when you have a group of taxonomy terms, in this case general business taxonomy, you can also give the ownership to somebody else, right? You might have already mentioned that then the site collection admins can manage those group of terms within their site collection, correct?
That's correct. You can see here that on this case, there is an owner for this general business taxonomy. When I've worked with customers before, they typically don't have a full-time taxonomist on staff, which is why I'm there. But they do have local like power users within a certain group of the company, like sales or HR or IT, whatever it happens to be. And so they tend to control or want to control or want to at least have a hand in how their local terms are built out.
Sure.
So they'll assume like, well, I can go to accounting and finance, and I can assign an owner to this, and I can let that person be notified or have control over how these terms get added. Typically, and I haven't quite got there yet, and I don't know if we're going to have enough time, but you can see if I scroll down here, and maybe someone's brought this question up, is that I'm going to go ahead and refresh this while we're waiting. When users are uploading documents to SharePoint sites, document libraries, they can add their own labels to terms. They can go ahead and just type out the tag they want to apply to it. When users do that, those appear down here in the system folder and underneath keywords. And what this really means is that these are the terms that users provided or typed entered into a document as it was being uploaded, and these terms, and part of the taxonomy governance long-term governance that I mentioned earlier, is that the taxonomist or the person in charge of the taxonomy is able to take these terms and, in a sense, promote them back up to taxonomies, sort of the preferred term taxonomies down here. So, for example, let's say, for example, HR. Under HR, I can have a lot of terms related to human resources, and these are typically things like job roles and things like that, so I can see job roles here. Let's say, for example, I want to put DBA in here, Database Administrator, but also I wanted to use that in a number of different places. There might be a case where someone has entered the label DBA down into keywords, and what I can do at that point is I would just move that keyword over to, or up to, promote it up to the taxonomy of job roles inside of HR, and then HR is going to control that term from now on. Real quickly, I didn't go over this earlier because I don't like to go over features. I like to go over more how to use it. But if you right-click on it, there's a lot of different ways to use terms. I can copy terms. I can reuse them in other term sets. Can't reuse the same term within the same term set, but you can use them across term sets. You can merge terms together. You can deprecate terms and move them. So these are fairly standard functions of how to move terms around. You can run into some conflicts. So there's ways to work around that, but you can move terms around and reuse terms, which is what I like to do, because if I want to have a term, say for example DBA, if I wanted to add the term DBA here along with CFO and CMO, it's going to update it. I could take the term DBA in this case and I could go say, well, let's pull the term up. Well, when it refreshes, thank you. DBA here, I can go ahead and add synonyms, or I could pull out the full, as I spell it out here, I can pull out a full name. So if I entered the phrase database administrator and a document, for example, was tagged with DBA, it would come up in search. And this is a great way to do this. You can do it the other way as well. I can have database administrator as the full term, put DBA, and here's a synonym. Bottom line here is if search is enabled to pick up other label synonyms, if I typed in DBA, it would also pick up documents and lists and things like that that were tagged with or had database administrator in them. So that's kind of a great way to use synonyms inside of the term store. And I could also now reuse this term DBA if I moved it up, for example, up into IT. And oftentimes what I see is that HR will build out all the job roles for the entire company, and then groups like IT will come along and just pick out the IT job roles and then copy them or reuse them down into their own term group. Pretty common practice.
Great stuff. So folks, we only have about 9 minutes remaining. We have a hard stop at 5 p.m. Eastern. So I'm going to go ahead and go through a few questions, Mike. Let's see if I can get these done quickly over here. So we got one from Dennis that jumped out at me, and this asks, can the term store content, I'm sorry, can the terms come, excuse me, can the term store contain dynamic terms? So for an example, a project list of active projects from within SharePoint. Can you just go ahead and pull them basically actively?
I guess you'd have to kind of further define what we mean by active, but typically what you do is you can build out terms inside of term sets, and you can import them like we talked about earlier through that spreadsheet Excel file. They would appear as term groups, and you could. I don't know really what dynamic means in the sense that if are they pulling. I don't.
Yeah, I think I know what he means by that. The way I looked at it was, let's say there's a list of projects out there or something, and it's actually a list, an actual custom list that was built. And I say, you know what, whatever terms, whatever choices get added onto that, I want them to be available, quote unquote, as terms. I don't think you can do that, right?
No, I don't think you can do that. I've never done it. Doesn't mean it can't be done. I don't know everything, but typically when you go through and do this, it is that process I described earlier of either building them out by hand, by up in here adding new terms, or by importing them through spreadsheet. I don't know of any other way that they could be dynamically updated. It's a great idea, and it might be in the next version, but for now, that's the only ways. I've done literally hundreds and hundreds of term sets. Right. I've never been able to figure that out. It might be done, and there might be something on CodePlex that might have it.
Yeah, you never know. That's true. I've never seen this either, by the way, but it's a good idea. So good job, Dennis. Maybe you want to write Microsoft about that, or we'll pass on the word.
That is a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. Check CodePlex. CodePlex has a lot of interesting variations on the term store. A lot of guys are doing it, to various degrees of success, I guess.
Here's a question by Dave is asking, can you declaratively define term store content in a Visual Studio solution?
I have never done that. That might be something to check out. My background is more on the library science, taxonomy side, but I can't rule it out. But I would just say that's an interesting very interesting idea.
Yeah, same here. I've not done that either.
That might be something worth pursuing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me read.
One thing I do want to talk about
in
between. I was going to say real quickly is that there's ways to bring in predefined taxonomies that are good, and I've used it and I use them all the time. But typically, what happens is that there always needs to be some adjustment or fine tuning done. And so one of the things that I often get asked is, can we just just buy taxonomies, put them in, and then it would automatically work? And I would say that gets you close, but you really do have to customize it for your own company, even if you're in the same industry. And I've seen that cases where I've worked on multiple taxonomies, say in the insurance industry, and from company to company, the taxonomies are going to be different.
Cool. Here's another question. This is asking, do you know of the issues with using managed metadata fields in InfoPath forms?
No, I do not know those. I typically work with database developers, system developers, so I always have a developer or two with me on projects. If we start going down that path, no pun intended, but if we start going that direction, I'm not the technical integration guy, but what I can do is work with guys who know how to do that sort of thing. That's a good question, though.
There are definitely some limitations from what I understand of what you can do in InfoPath as far as managed metadata is concerned. We were all hoping when it came out that there would be a tighter integration with managed metadata and it'd be able to just pull the terms directly into InfoPath format, but I have not seen anything like that either, unfortunately. And I've not even seen a solution out there that somebody has developed to make that happen, but if anybody has seen it, please let us know and we'll share it with everybody. So that would be awesome.
Right, and I think that that would be great to do, and this certainly would be the place to go inside of the taxonomies that get those terms already built out for use inside of InfoPath.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's see. I think there's, of course, a bunch of questions out there, and folks, we're very sorry, but of course we'll not be able to take most of them. They're really, really good questions. I've been trying as much as possible to answer them as Mike has been presenting. Let's see. I'm just going to go ahead and read one. Let's see if this makes sense here. Is there any tool that you have used to map where and or how term stored items used, such as MindJet's mind map? That's what Tim is asking.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good question. I use it all the time. I mean, I go in and oftentimes. So a couple of things. One, honestly, I mean, this is not bragging, but I mean, I've done this a lot, and I've built a lot of these different taxonomies for different industries. So I already have a lot of stuff in my back pocket, so to speak. But when I go out and do something net new that has to do with taxonomies, I'm always using a tool like MindMapper, working with certain stakeholders inside the companies to help build out the first pass of these taxonomies. And there's different rules that I bring to the table, but I always find that when I go and work on these things, it's best to I like to start, or I already kind of have in my back pocket 60-70% of what's needed, and then we just go in and fine-tune it for every company. But yeah, Mind Manager, Mind Map, that's a great way to start. There's other tools as well.
Great. Let me go ahead and switch back to my screen here, Mike. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Change presenter. There we go, and there we go. All right, you should be able to see my screen hopefully, and let me go ahead and once again show these coupon codes to people in case you guys are interested. I put it in the chat as well. So Mike has done, like we've mentioned before, the whole DVD full of lots of good term store content, taxonomy content. And if you are interested in grabbing that DVD, there's 10% off right now until 23rd of this month. And as I mentioned earlier too, that if you are a subscriber to SharePointVideos.com, you can get any of the single user DVDs for 25% off with the member DVD coupon code. So keep that in mind. I want to go ahead and close this out actually because, like I said, there's a hard stop. We are going to be posting the recording of this webinar on our site, so that should be out there in a few days, 3 or 4 days at the most. Thank you very much for everybody for joining us this afternoon, and hope to see you with another webinar. We're going to be doing one on, I believe, records management and also project management pretty soon as well. So both of those are coming up. If there's any questions, feedbacks, thoughts, comments on any of these webinars or ideas for other webinars, we would love them. So go to SharePointVideos.com, go to Contact Us, and let us know. All right. Thanks a lot, and thank you very much, Mike. This was awesome information. I learned a lot myself. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks also. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye now.